Hello and welcome back to the Breakthrough Love Podcast. It's nice to have you back here. Hey, Michelle, what's the big idea? What's the big idea? Because today we're talking about big picture thinking versus detail-oriented, detail-focused thinking. Or in another way of putting it, chunking up versus chunking down, where chunking up refers to having more of that big picture, high-level type of thinking, the broader interpretation.
Abstract, visionary sort of thinking. Abstracted
thinking, yes. Versus chunking down, which refers to more in the weeds, sort of like focusing on the details, the smaller, more specific things. And so we are going to get into that. But first, because it was so cool, we wanted to share a dream that Michelle just had. Take it away.
Yes, I was just telling Joshua how I was having a dream the other day. I woke up a little bit earlier on the weekend than I wanted to, and I was trying to fall back asleep. And when I tend to fall back asleep like that in the mornings, I usually go into REM like right away, and I start having these dreams. So I started having this dream that I was receiving some sort of energy work, right? Like just like really cool energy work. And as soon as I started receiving it, I felt like this intense calm, like wave go through my body. And I felt it physically, even in my dream, like I just slumped. And I kept hearing the same thing chanted over and over and over. So of course, I wake up from this dream because I was only in that light REM sort of phase of sleep anyway. And the first thing that I do is I go to good old Google because I'm like, is this chant, like, are the words that I heard real words? And I Google it, and sure enough, even though I do not consciously know this language, I was dreaming of actual words. And it was so amazing because the language it was is a language where the meaning of the words are different based on the context. But just doing the literal translation of the words, they are about knowing, to know, and also about trusting. So how cool that my unconscious mind somehow tapped into who knows what, whether that's past life or just the collective unconscious or the collective consciousness, whatever it was a really, really cool feeling to have, to know and to trust that whatever is going on right now is exactly where I need to be just from having that dream.
Yeah, and it was actually kind of sort of like a bit of a message to me because we had just, before you told me about this dream, we were just talking about figuring out how the two of us can do the HUNA training from Dr. Matt James' NLP company in San Diego later this year in December. And lo and behold, you had a dream in Hawaiian. HUNA, of course, is a Hawaiian thing. And it just kind of makes me think like, well, should I just trust and know that training is one that we should go to in San Diego?
We literally were just talking about going to that. And I didn't even put two and two together. See, my message, and here's the takeaway, at least for me, is like, you never know when your message is somebody else's message too.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's why we do a lot of what we do here, is because whether it's something that we're going through or something that someone that we know, whether that's a client or just somebody, friend, acquaintance is going through, I know personally, this is my belief, and I believe that Joshua probably shares this perspective, is that whatever is happening in our environment, whatever comes into our awareness, it's happening for a reason, and it's happening so that we can share it, because we do have this platform, because we do have this shared purpose to be able to say, hey, we're going to share our stories and everything that's going on with everyone else, because you never know who else needs to hear about what somebody else or yourself is going through.
For sure. So for the episode today, we're talking about, I had mentioned chunking up and chunking down, big picture thinking versus smaller, specific detail focused thinking. But like, who cares? I just told you what those things are. Well, this is going to be an important episode for you to listen to if you are finding that this is especially an issue for like communication stuff and working with people. Maybe you're having trouble getting through to your team or making yourself be understood in a relationship or in a team setting as a leader or even as an employee. If you want to learn how to run your meetings more effectively or how to manage your team more effectively, this is going to be an important episode for you. Have you ever been in a meeting and it just kind of becomes clear over time that some people are just not on the same page as the rest of the people? Like sometimes I have this in meetings with clients and teams that I work with where there's maybe one person, and sometimes it's me, who is just kind of like thinking on a different plane than what everyone else is trying to talk about. And it's not like they're on a different subject. They're just kind of thinking at a different level. Like maybe everyone's getting really specific and looking at a detailed approach to a solution. And this one person is kind of more head in the clouds. Like, what's the big picture here? And not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's a time and a place for it, or vice versa. Whereas maybe you've been in a meeting and you're kind of in the very beginning discussion of something. And then there's that one person in the room who wants to figure out what the color for the logo on the website should be. And you're not even there yet, and not even close to being there. This is the kind of thing that this can help with.
Yeah. And especially when it comes to meetings or even outside of meetings, just in the general workplace or general being a human, maybe you have really, really, really great ideas, but then when you're wanting to sell them, you just can't really figure out how to sell them, how to figure out how does this apply to actual life. You're not able to get specific on it. Or you might be the opposite. You might be like, oh my God, I have this amazing, very detailed, specific process. And you start jumping into it. And everyone's like, why are you talking about these details and process? Like, I don't even understand. Like, you're not able to communicate why this is relevant to them because you don't understand how to communicate in the bigger picture. So these are the things that, these are the things that are the most common when you're talking about this very, very simple concept in communication that we're going to cover today. So where I want to begin is by talking about filters, because everything we're talking about now absolutely applies to the filters that every single person, every human being has for how they perceive the world. We've talked about this a lot at length. But in case we have any first-time listeners checking out our podcast today, I want to do a brief overview of this. So we know that our unconscious mind is a supercomputer and is able to manage over 2 million bits of information per second. The visual that we love to talk about here is imagine that you have 2 million toothpicks falling all around you. How do you know which toothpicks you're going to focus on? This is where your filters come in. Your brain automatically is going to delete, distort, generalize all of those toothpicks, all of the information that you have coming at you so that you can make sense of the world, because 2 million is just a lot to focus on. Okay.
Yeah. That, sorry to interrupt, but I think about this scene in The Matrix. I think it's The Matrix number 2, because I don't think I've seen number 3. Where he's in that room. Oh, was it Matrix number 1 or 2? Where he's in the room, there's all those TVs of him, Neo. I think he's meeting the creator or whatever. Have you seen Matrix 2?
I don't remember anything about The Matrix.
Okay.
I don't think
wow.
I ever finished watching it.
The Matrix 1 is so good, and 2 and 3, to my understanding, are not. But 2, I think in 2 he's meeting the creator guy, or the architect, I think is his name. Mm-hmm. And he's in the room with the architect, and there's like a bunch of TVs on that are kind of like echoing back all the different kind of reactions he could have and think and say, and sometimes even what he's thinking. Neo, by the way, the main character. And I think about, like, what if there were just like 2 million TVs with all these different kind of pieces of information, not necessarily reflections of ourselves or like Neo saw himself, but just anything. And you can only choose, how many can you focus on?
126 bits.
26?
Conscious mind can only handle 126 bits.
So you can only choose 126 TVs out of the 2 million to actually focus on at a given time. That's how that's, I think, a way that I would like to think about that. When I think about that kind of analogy, that's kind of one that does it for me. I don't always do, as a guy, this is kind of like a random offshoot, but as a guy who doesn't always do well with like metaphors like that, I tend to just get things the way they're said literally. But when I think about if yeah, exactly. Maybe this might be a helpful metaphor or analogy for someone who listening is like me.
Absolutely. So you got your toothpicks, you got your TVs. Yeah. Whatever the case, you can only focus on 126 of them at any given time.
And even still, my literal brain is like, how could you focus on even more than 2 TVs at once? But I have to be like, shut up, literal brain. That's not the point.
And that's the beauty of it, right? Because our conscious mind's still very, very powerful as well. Because to your point, yeah, being able to focus on 126 things. So how does your conscious mind know what to focus on? Well, you have these filters in place. You've got beliefs, you've got values, you've got memories, past experiences that are programs, if you will, that your unconscious mind has learned over your lifetime. Hey, these are the things that are important. So I'm just going to delete, distort, and generalize everything else, all those other 2 million minus 126, whatever number that is, based on these rules that are set forth that I've learned are important to this person. And so that's why everyone perceives the world differently. And that's why everyone has different preferences for how they want to experience their life, how they communicate. And this is also why we tend to fall into this trap sometimes of thinking that everybody else thinks the same way we do. Because how would you know if you've never really thought about it? You wouldn't necessarily expect that other people think differently than you do. You have to build that awareness. That's where emotional intelligence comes in. When you are able to perceive not just what's going on inside of you, but what are other people perceiving, what's important to them. And so this definitely ties into emotional intelligence. And the reason we're talking so much about filters is because being a big picture thinker or a more detailed thinker absolutely is a type of filter that you may have set up. So once you have that awareness and you understand how you think about certain things, how other people think about certain things, you can start to learn how to communicate. A, how you like to be communicated with, or B, how can you, if you're in a leadership position, especially, if you want to be more influential, how can you communicate so that you actually get what you want? Mm-hmm. You get your message across.
Yeah. Because, yeah, it's very true. Like this is a thing that we've learned in our own studies, but the person who is more flexible is going to have more control. So if you are willing to change the way that you communicate, you are going to be able to exert more influence over people, over situations, over yourself.
Yeah. Okay. And in the case of leadership and being more effective in communication and being better at whatever it is you do for a living, I mean, who doesn't want more of that? And so I really want to start talking about the specific filter we're talking about today is about whether you're a big picture thinker or a more detailed picture thinker. And a lot of the times, you're going to have a combination of both. In fact, most of the population is what we would call a big picture thinker to a more detailed thinker.
What does that mean?
So what that means is that you want to know what the big picture is first, and then you want to understand, okay, now that I know that bigger picture, what's my role? What are the details? What do I need to know specifically? So most people are this way. I forget the percentage, but it's a majority. So what happens is that if you speak to a person who thinks this way and you start jumping in with all of the details, it's like they tune you out. They can't hear you because you're going against the way their programming is. I mean, think about it. If they have a program that is automatic, that is set to say, okay, when we hear big picture information, we run the program of let's listen and find out what the vision is in the big picture. And then we're going to get our details. And that's how we run our program. If you're going to do it opposite for somebody, then they start to fritz out and they're just like, I'm not hearing this because it's not relevant to me, because it's not following my protocols. And so I was actually talking to Joshua about how there was a period in my life where I was doing multiple jobs. It's probably about a 5-year span where, and not even then, just even when I was in corporate, I would be moving from position to position to position to position. And what happens, one of the great things about that is that I got to learn a lot about learning and how I learned best. And what I learned about myself is that if somebody was just trying to take me and say, hey, just watch what I'm doing and then you're going to learn how I do it. Like, who had that sort of training where they were expected to just jump right in, watch someone and then already know? Like, anybody who has experienced that, most people will probably say, yeah, that's like the worst kind of training you could possibly get, because you're literally just being thrown into the weeds and expected to figure it out. So that's an example of this, right? Because it's like you're being told, here are all the specific details, but you have no frame of reference for why any of it's relevant, how it fits into the bigger picture. So I'm hoping that you're starting to see now why this is so relevant, how it's so important, how it really impacts the way that we receive information if we're not receiving it the correct way. But you also have the opposite of this. You have people out there who actually want to know the details first and then give them a bigger picture. So if there are any listeners who are like, yeah, that's the best kind of training there is, you may or may not be in that camp of like, hey, I love to know the details about something first. And then I can think about how this relates to the bigger picture and how I can apply it and that sort of thing. Same thing though, if you start to talk to one of these people about the vision and like, can you imagine yourself doing this? And they're just like, I don't care what your vision is. I want to know how specifically it's going to be impacting me. Like, how is my life going to be impacted by X, Y, or Z? Tell me what I'm going to be doing, what's expected of me, and then tell me which direction we're going. So again, with either one of those two types of listeners, whether you're big picture to smaller picture, or if you're smaller picture to bigger picture, you're going to want to know that they think this way because you want to make sure you do it in that proper order. Then you have the other two camps, which is, hey, I'm just a detailed thinker and I don't really need to know the big picture afterwards. Or, hey, I'm just a big picture thinker and I don't actually need to know the details. There are actually people out there who are like this, who just need one or the other. And these are going to be more flexible people because it doesn't matter to them if you start off with bigger picture, as long as you give them the details if they're a detailed thinker, and vice versa. So this is the first step of awareness, is just really understanding, who are you? How do you actually think? And then the next step of awareness would be to figure out, well, how are the people that I'm communicating with on a daily basis? What is my boss's filters on this? What are my employees, my team members that I am their supervisor? What are their filters on this? And then I'm sure you can start to see how you could start to apply this sort of thinking so that you can tailor your communication specifically.
Thanks, Michelle. So to call back to what I was talking about earlier in the episode, chunking up and chunking down, that is something that's going to become useful when you are dealing, for example, in a meeting where someone is really, like in the example that I used earlier with the color of the logo, they're really on a not a different topic, but a different page of the book. And you need to bring them back to, the first chapter where everyone else is. When someone is in a place where they're too detail oriented, they're looking at something way too specific that isn't necessarily applicable or relevant right now, you can bring them back. You can use chunking up and chunking down for the opposite, of course, to bring them back or forward to where they need to be to get with the rest of the team. Alternatively, you can use this on yourself if you're finding that you are the one, and awareness is the place to start here. But if you are the one who is just on a different page from everybody else, it's kind of like that saying, if everyone else is a jerk, then you're probably the jerk. Well, if everyone else is on the wrong page, maybe maybe they're wrong, but maybe also assess, are you even focused on the right thing in this meeting? And so you can catch yourself if you happen to be off track.
Yeah, if you're getting so deep into an issue, because we've all had this happen. You go into a meeting, you start talking about something, you get really excited. Before you know it, you're figuring out one very specific issue instead of going into the agenda topics.
Yeah. And sometimes I've been leading meetings where like the rest of the team is down the line on a specific thing and I'm still stuck on, okay, but why? Without, and like, okay, yes, it's important that I know that, but also it's not necessary right now to get the job done. And sometimes all you need is to just get the job done. So this is where chunking up and chunking down is really helpful.
Is the purpose of the meeting to ideate and to go over the high level things, and any specific things need to be separate meetings? Or is this that separate meeting where you were supposed to be figuring out the problem?
Yeah, indeed.
And so the easiest way to get yourself chunked up is to ask yourself the questions: for what purpose? Or what is this an example of? Or for what intention? So if you're trying to bring someone up into more of the abstract, bigger picture thinking, they're getting too into the weeds, those are the questions that you could ask them, or yourself. If you're wondering about asking about something, then you can ask yourself, for what intention do I want to ask this question? And once you have that, for what intention do I want that? And for what intention do I want that? You can get yourself up to a higher level of thinking. If you're being too big picture and you really need to get more specific, the question to ask is, what specifically? So what is a specific example of this? Because then you have to start to get more specific about what is the next step. What are the details of this? So just take a moment and ask yourself, what specifically do I mean by this? And what specifically do I mean by that? And the last level of chunking is going to be lateral chunking. And that's exactly what it sounds like, going into a different topic laterally. The question to ask in that case is, what is an example? What is another example of this? The question to ask yourself in this case is, what is another example of this? And that just helps you go into another topic. So I'm sure you can start to see how you can use these questions either internally or even externally to get yourself thinking in different ways, either bigger picture, smaller picture, or we need to move on to the next topic. And so that brings us into the how. How do we bring this all together? The first step is figure out how you think. So the way you can ask yourself, the way you can do this is by asking yourself, whenever I'm about to work on a project, do I want to know the big picture first or the details first? Simple as that. And then whatever the answer is, whether it was bigger or detailed, you ask, okay, once I have that, would I actually need to know the opposite? So once I had the big picture, would I actually still want and need to know the details? If the answer is yes, then you're one of those who thinks big picture and then needs details. If the answer is no, then you're just a big picture thinker. You don't need the details and you're happy as long as you get the information. So you work through that. Step 2 is figure out, if you can, what everyone else is. And when I say if you can, I mean the easiest way to do this is by just asking them the exact same questions that you would ask yourself. Hey, when we're working on projects, do you prefer to know the big picture first or the details first? And then you can start to make sure that you're tailoring your communication with each individual, like when you have one-on-ones. Again, remembering that most people are big picture to more specific picture, and that's probably going to be the safest route to go for the majority of a room that you're communicating with, just as a kind of rule of thumb. But understanding when there are people who are detailed, you might have a big light bulb aha moment of like, oh, it's this way.
You're not getting it? Yeah.
Struggle to communicate about certain things.
Yeah.
Step 3 would be to start noticing it everywhere. So just like we were talking about with chunking up and down, like start to, when you're in a conversation with a person, whether or not it's a meeting or or, just a random conversation, start to follow along with like, oh, they just chunked up. Oh, they just went down and got more specific about this. Oh, they just changed. The more you practice and focus your awareness on this, the more you're telling yourself, your unconscious mind, these are important to me. I want to learn how to do these and recognize these. And then the last step is to actually practice communicating according to what you're observing, right? So you're figuring it out, you're noticing it, and now you're going to start communicating based on how you want the conversation to go. If you want to bring it back up, you start asking those questions and leading into how do we get it more high level? How do we move on to next topic, or how do I get more specific?
Brilliant summary. Thank you, Michelle. With that, I think it's time to end the episode since you've got all the information. And perhaps if you have a spare moment, I would encourage you to chunk laterally to previous episodes that you may not have heard.